Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's public meeting for the Miller Road Soils Management Program. This meeting is being recorded, and a recording of this meeting will be posted on EBMUD's website at EBMUD.com/Miller Road, all one word. I am Rolando Gonzalez. I'm a community affairs representative for EBMUD. We appreciate your time and thank you for coming. It's great to have you here for this virtual public meeting for this program. We are going to be presenting to you the draft for the initial study for the Mitigated Negative Declaration, or MND. There's a reason why this soil management program is needed, and we hope to explain why it's a vital component for replacing aging pipelines in the Castro Valley area and Ward 7. We will do the presentation first and then answer your questions at the end of the presentation. You may type in your questions on the Q&A box in the lower portion of your screens during the course of this presentation, and we can read it out loud. If you want to ask your questions, we can also unmute you if you want, but if you don't want to speak, you just put in your questions in the Q&A and we will answer it. All right, without much further ado, presenting for EBMUD tonight is Mr. Gus Chicala, who is a senior civil engineer for EBMUD. Gus.
Thank you, Rolando. And thank you, folks, for attending. My name is Gus Chicala. I'm a senior civil engineer in the Maintenance and Construction Department at EBMUD. Today, I'm providing an update on the trench soil management program at the Miller Road stockpile site in Castro Valley, which is a critical site for EBMUD's ability to deliver clean, safe drinking water to residents. I'll begin with a brief background of EBMUD's trench soil management program, including an update on our latest efforts in the program. I'll then dive into the details of the Miller Road soil stockpile site and the development of the initial study and draft mitigated negative declaration, or MND, to analyze the potential impacts and mitigations, and then I'll review the next steps for the CEQA work. The district generates approximately 55,000 cubic yards of clean excavated soil from pipeline replacement and maintenance activities performed by district crews every year. I'll describe the process in a little more detail in the next slides, but generally the excavated trench soil is taken to one of 3 stockpile sites shown here, with the total capacities and the current volume of fill at each site. The largest site is the Brione stockpile near Orinda, with an airspace of over 500,000 cubic yards. We've done several soil removal projects at Briones over the last few years, which has freed up a lot of airspace. Miller Road is the next largest site at over 100,000 cubic yards and is located north of Castro Valley. We conducted a large soil removal from Miller Road in 2019, and it is nearly full again. Amador is the smallest of the sites, and it's located in San Ramon and is seldom used. This slide shows more detail about the district's typical historical practice for handling trench soil for pipeline replacement projects. This process has been in place since at least 1975 at the Miller Road site. The trench is dug and soil is placed directly into a dump truck next to the trench. The soil is then hauled to one of EBMUD's stockpile sites. We store rock and sand at the stockpile sites adjacent to the trench soil site, which is used as trench backfill material around and above the new pipeline. The truck is loaded with rock or sand for a return trip back to the job site, as shown in the third image. We then perform periodic soil removal projects when the sites are near capacity. We do extensive testing of the stockpiled soils to characterize the soil for use at beneficial end-use sites, such as the Oyster Bay Regional Shoreline Project pictured here, which we've taken a lot of soil to in the past. This process requires handling the soil twice, and we've begun implementing alternative soil management approaches to limit the impacts of our trench soil management program. Presented here are 3 alternative trench soil management practices that we've been pursuing. First, we've piloted native slurry backfill, where we treat the soil that we remove from the trench and then reuse the amended soil in the trench as backfill. We also continue to explore ways to expand our use of trenchless technology to reduce the amount of soil generated. This includes technologies such as cured in place pipe for pipeline rehabilitation. And then the primary alternative approach that we've been implementing is called direct haul, where excavated soil is taken directly from the pipeline project to a beneficial reuse site. This avoids the need to double handle that soil and reduces the size and frequency of off-haul events, lowering the costs, lowering the emissions from trucking, and any potential impacts to communities.
Can you hold on a second, Gus? Can everybody see the slides? Because Daybreak said he couldn't see the slides. I just want to make sure that
I can see them.
you can
Yeah,
see.
I can see him now, Rolando. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
thank you. I apologize for the interruption. Thank you.
No problem. I want to make sure everyone can see and hear, so that's good. We've been utilizing direct haul since January of last year, taking soil directly from portions of 10 different pipeline installation projects to the Dumbarton Quarry, which is a previous quarry site in Fremont near the Dumbarton Bridge. The Dumbarton Quarry was mined from the 1950s until 2007 and is now being filled to be turned into an East Bay Regional Park. In the picture, you can see the quarry being filled on the left-hand side with the Phase 1 campground on the right-hand side, which was completed and open to the public for camping in 2021. The plan is to turn the second phase into a parkland once it is filled, and we expect that to take about 10 years with soil from East Bay MUD projects in addition to other projects in the Bay Area. We direct hauled about 15% of our clean trench soil in 2024 to Dumbarton Quarry. The amount of direct haul we're able to do at any particular time is variable, though, depending on end-use site availability and proximity to our pipeline projects. So to ensure we have end-use sites available for any particular pipeline replacement project, we need a robust list of geographically diverse sites. So we've been working with and developing a list of candidate sites and working with the beneficial reuse partners and coming up with agreements to use their sites. One such project where we transferred soil from the Miller Road stockpile for a beneficial end use was for the Redwood Road landslide repair project. Redwood Road had been closed since January 2023 as a result of several landslides. East Bay MUD reached out to Alameda County to see if they needed any soil for their landslide repair. County staff indicated that they did need soil and were planning on trucking it in from their stockpile site all the way out in Livermore. East Bay MUD worked with county staff on an agreement to transfer soil from the district's Miller Road stockpile site, which is less than 2 miles from the landslide repair. We provided the county with our soil testing data, and the county performed additional geotechnical testing of the stockpiled soil and determined that our soil would meet their needs. East Bay MUD's contractor loaded the haul trucks for the county's repair contractor between September 27th and October 18th last year. In the image on the top left, you can see the landslide as it was in October 2023. And then on the right-hand side, the repaired section of road as of last month, or as of February, 2 months ago now. The bottom photo shows the county's 2 haul trucks being loaded by East Bay MUD's contractor. The project was beneficial for the county, for the district, and for residents, saving about 400 truckloads of soil going through Castro Valley by eliminating the county import and the future district off-haul of that soil. So very successful collaboration there. Now we'll turn our attention more specifically to the Miller Road stockpile. To orient you, the map on the left shows where the stockpile is situated, north of Interstate 580 and Castro Valley. The map on the right shows a zoomed-in aerial of the stockpile sites along Miller Road. Trucks generally travel from Interstate 580, then north on Redwood Road to access the site. They drop trench soil at the stockpile site at the north end of the figures. And as the trucks travel out of the site, they stop at the rock and sand stockpile to pick up material to head back to the job site and backfill the pipeline trench. In addition to the district trucks accessing the site, vendor trucks are required to stage the backfill, the rock and the sand. And then there are periodic removal events of trench soil as the stockpile site nears capacity. The district has performed these periodic off-hauls for decades, with the last few removal projects summarized on the table at the left. We conducted soil off-hauls from Briones in 2018 and from Miller Road in 2019, which were the first major off-hauls in many years. These off-hauls did not go as smoothly as we had hoped. The communities raised concerns, and they were definitely a learning experience for the district. Since then, we've improved our approach to the off-haul events and developed a much stronger contract with our off-haul contractor. There have been 2 off-hauls from Briones site in Orinda in 2022 and 2024, where we worked under the new off-haul contract requirements, dramatically reduced the trucking hours, and provided more oversight of the trucking operations. These off-hauls were about 4 times larger than the maximum off-haul we're proposing for Miller Road, and we were able to complete these off-hauls with minimal impacts to the city of Orinda, and they were very successful. We had planned another off-haul event for Miller Road in 2023, but during the outreach process for that off-haul, the project was effectively put on hold when Alameda County informed us that we would need a conditional use permit, or a CUP, to continue operating the stockpile site, since the site is zoned as agricultural. The CUP process requires that a CEQA and California Environmental Quality Act CEQA environmental review be completed. So in March of 2024, the East Bay MUD board authorized a professional services agreement for the CEQA work. So since March of last year, we've been working with Panorama Environmental, who is with us here on the call tonight, to conduct the initial study to determine any potential environmental impacts of the project. This led to development of the draft mitigated negative declaration, MND, based on the determination that any potential environmental impacts could be mitigated to a less than significant level. The draft MND was released for public comment on March 20th. It is available at ebmud.com/Miller Road, and we are currently accepting written comments this evening. The MND analyzed any potential impacts from continued operation of the site. We also modeled an increase in the use of the site as we further ramp up pipeline replacements from about 25 miles per year now to about 30 miles per year by the year 2030. Although the MND modeled an increase in site usage in order to analyze the worst case impacts, we actually expect a decrease in future use of the site as we continue to expand direct hauling and our other alternative trench soil management techniques. This table summarizes the truck activity for Miller Road site under several scenarios. I'll spend a little time walking you through the table. The top row shows the trucking activity for average day-to-day operations of the site, which includes dropping off excavated soil and picking up of rock and sand to backfill the trench. It also accounts for the delivery of the rock and sand by EBMUD's material vendors. The bottom row shows the estimated trucking activity for off-haul events under the three scenarios represented by each of the columns. The first column is the historical average day-to-day operations and details about the off-haul event from 2019. The second column represents the scenario analyzed by the MND. The MND conservatively assumed we would increase pipeline replacements to 30 miles per year by 2030, but that we would not utilize direct haul or other methods to reduce the amount of stockpile soil generated. So then the third column is the more realistic expected future use of the site, with increased pipeline replacements, but also an expansion of direct haul, decreasing the reliance on temporary stockpile sites. There are a few main takeaways from the numbers here. First, the day-to-day operations are minimal compared to the off-haul events, contributing just a few trucks per workday. Additionally, you can see the 2019 off-haul event was rather large in scale, where we removed over 100,000 cubic yards from the site. Off-hauls under both of the future scenarios in the last two columns are much less intense overall, with a maximum of 50,000 cubic yards removed per event, and also our plan to have less trucks per day, with a maximum of 200 trucks per day compared to about 300 trucks per day in 2019. The number of trucks per day can also be further reduced by extending the duration of off-haul events. For example, in the MND analyzed scenario in the middle column, the event would last about a month if we did about 200 trucks per day, or 3 months if we limited to about 70 trucks per day. However, we have found from the recent Briones off-hauls that 200 trucks per day is a good balance of duration and intensity. We also have reduced the work hours to start after the morning rush hour and end before the evening peak times. Although we target and anticipate hauling only during summer months, if there is an opportunity to off-haul during the school year that makes too much sense to pass up while school is in session, such as with the Redwood Road landslide repair, then the trucks need to be off of local roads by 3 p.m. This slide describes a little more detail about the assumptions that went into the MND analysis, which results in the potentially worst case scenario. In these scenarios, we analyzed all three components of the project overlapping. So that's bringing in the trench soils, bringing in and offloading the rock and sand, and then the off-haul events. So it assumes they all overlap, and that the off-haul event is completed in the shortest amount of time with a higher intensity than one that's spread out over time. The analysis also assumes a future scenario in which there is no direct haul or other alternative soil management practices, although we are already aggressively pursuing alternative options. And additionally, existing operations were not included in the baseline assessment to show the greatest increase in potential impacts. So even though this is something we've been doing since 1975, the analysis pretended like we're going from 0 to whatever the future scenario would be. Off-haul events were modeled to include a maximum limit of 50,000 cubic yards per event. So in the next few slides, I'll review the results for some of the top items, specifically air quality, noise, and traffic. So the project was analyzed to determine if operations would have a negative impact on air quality in accordance with Bay Area Air Quality Management District threshold criteria. This table shows the results of that on both an annual basis and on a daily basis. And the conclusion from that is no emissions were above the Bay Area Air Quality District thresholds. or health risk assessment for exposure to diesel emissions at sensitive receptors along the haul route. And there's much more analysis in the MND, but I'll spare that, and you can you can check, and there's a whole appendix going into all the analysis. Next, I'll briefly touch on the noise analysis. Again, this is with the same worst case assumptions of everything happening all at once and with an increase in use of the site. So for the noise analysis, we modeled the existing and future scenarios for 4 points along the off-haul route in Redwood Road, as shown in the table. A threshold of 3 A-weighted decibels was used because increases are considered barely perceptible according to the Caltrans technical noise supplement. So again, the project did not exceed the 3 decibel scenario at any of the 4 points modeled along the haul route. And again, there's much more detail in the written MND. And then the final factor I'll review in a little more detail is the traffic. Again, this is assuming the worst case scenario of increased use of the site and all project components occurring simultaneously. And we did not include the existing operations in the baseline in order to be conservative. 2 scenarios were modeled, the existing plus baseline of 2024, and then the future plus baseline, future being 2030, when we expect to have greater pipeline replacements. We modeled 4 intersections along Redwood Road at 580 East and West ramps at Castro Valley Boulevard and at 7 Hills Road. And all intersections modeled continue to operate at a level of service of at least E, which is the acceptable threshold according to the Castro Valley area plan of the Alameda County General Plan. So yeah, there's much more detail about that in the MND, and then there's detail about all these categories as well, all these environmental factors that were analyzed. And basically, if all these, they were found to be either no impact or less than significant, and then 2 of the factors require mitigation to bring them to a less than significant level. Specifically, the mitigations lessen the potential impacts to the transportation system and associated emergency response in the case of a wildfire. So these are the mitigation measures that the MND recommends be employed to minimize the impacts of heavy truck traffic during off-haul events. These mitigations enhance safety through driver awareness, enforcement, and communication, through giving written safety requirements to all truck drivers, installing radar feedback signs along Redwood Road, conducting roadway surveys before and after the off-hauls to assess and repair any damage along the haul route. By employing these mitigation measures and coordinating with emergency services, we minimize any potential significant impacts to the transportation system from this project. These are all listed out in the MMRP as a in the appendix of the MND. In addition to the mitigation measures identified in the MND, I want to emphasize that we are incorporating other lessons learned from previous off-hauls to reduce the impacts to the community. Specifically, this includes more extensive community outreach before an off-haul, reducing off-haul hours as previously described, ensuring East Bay MUD has an on-site presence using construction inspectors during the off-haul, dust control measures, including street sweeping, vacuuming, at least weekly during off-haul events, and more if needed. And we always adhere to our stormwater pollution prevention plan with proper BMPs and reporting. We performed very successful off-hauls of a larger scale from Briones through Orinda in 2022 and 2024 using these lessons learned. The photos at the right are actual implementation photos from the Briones off-haul in 2024, including some of the extensive inspection documentation that we kept on a daily basis during the off-hauls. So the draft MND is currently in the public review period. We will be accepting written comments through May 19th, 2025. We actually extended that. It was a 30-day review period, but that's now a 60-day review period ending on May 19th. You can mail written comments per the instructions on ebmud.com/Miller Road or by emailing miller.road@ebmud.com. After the public review period ends, we will spend the next few months preparing the final MND and response to comments document, and plan to bring the final MND to East Bay MUD's board for consideration on August 12th of this year. Upon adoption of the final MND, we apply for the full conditional use permit with Alameda County. In addition to being able to view the full MND at ebmud.com/Miller Road, there's also a hard copy available for review at the Castro Valley Library. If you want to go there and look at the hard copy, So the draft should be available for review now. And then when we get to the final MND in response to comments, that should also be available at the Castro Valley Library in hard copy. And then again, at our website, ebmud.com/Miller Road. And that website will also contain any other project updates that may happen as the project moves forward. So be sure to bookmark that one. So with that, thank you for your attention. I'll now take any questions. And then you can see on the slide that construction-south@ebmud.com will go to Rolando. And he can help direct any questions you may have about this project or any other projects happening in the Castro Valley area. There's the phone number as well. And then if it's an emergency or after hours, please call East Bay MUD's emergency number shown on the screen. So I'll be happy to take any questions now.
All right. Thank you, Gus. So let me remove the spotlight so everybody can see everybody. There was a question that was asked by Stephen, and I want to make sure that the explanation, the question is answered fully. He asked, what is the final destination for trench spoils removed from Miller site? If these awful materials are not contaminated, why not use them as a native backfill concurrent with pipeline work?
Okay, yeah, I can answer those. See for the price of one. So the final destination will be determined, when we actually do the off-haul events. We'll see what beneficial reuse projects are in the area. Right now, the main one is the Dumbarton Quarry that plans, they need millions of cubic yards and it should be still filling over the next 10 years, and it's conveniently located near Miller Road. We've also taken a lot of soil from the Briones off-haul and previous off-hauls to the Oyster Bay Regional Shoreline for their reuse project. I think that site is now capped, although I've heard that a couple times and they still were like, actually, we need a little more, and we've been able to pry them with soil. But I think, yeah, Dumbarton Quarry would be the main site likely. But yeah, it'll depend on basically what's nearby and who needs the soil and what's the best beneficial reuse at the time that we're doing the off-haul event. And that's part of our contract, is to find and identify the best use of the soil when we get to that point. And then the off-haul materials are not contaminated, so confirm that. We do extensive sampling before we move them, and so we don't use native backfill much. We piloted it a few times, but the native soil is generally not good enough as a backfill material for our pipes unless we do some kind of amendment or add something or let the soil dry out and then can properly compact it. And that ends up being pretty disruptive in the street. It's better for the stockpile site, but not for when we're installing the pipeline down the street. It's pretty disruptive and dusty and noisy. And we've tried it a couple times, and we're going to continue trying it and finding ways to better be able to reuse the native soil. Because yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to rather than trucking stuff off and trucking stuff in, to just reuse what's on site. So we are definitely continuing to pilot that technology and finding ways to be able to do that without causing too many impacts around the pipeline project.
All right, thank you guys. So if you want to, you can put it on the chat, or if you want to ask your questions verbally, you could just raise your hands and let us know you want to ask a questions. Does anybody like to ask any further questions? If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Gus, you did a great job of explaining the project, the program. So if there are no questions, then I'd like to thank everybody for coming. We value your input. Please remember to submit your written comments to miller.road@ebmud.com. This meeting was recorded and will be made available on the Miller Road webpage at ebmud.com/Miller Road. Thank you very much for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.